Hi, welcome to the SDP. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the first video game systems I owned, the Game Gear handheld by Sega. Launched in 1991, this was one of the few handhelds that stood its ground against Nintendo and its Game Boy and DS dynasties. Whereas the Game Boy could only display shades of gray, the Game Gear had a full-color screen like the Atari Lynx. The hardware was remarkably similar to Sega's Master System. In fact, there was an adapter made to run Master System games on the Game Gear. But it wasn't perfect. The biggest problem with the Game Gear was its battery life. This thing took 6 AA batteries and could drain them in 2 to 3 hours. Yeah, you ever heard people whine about the batteries in the 3DS or the iPhone? At least those are rechargeable. If you wanted to get around this, you could either buy a bulky battery pack, mine doesn't work anymore, or plug it into the wall. Kinda defeats the purpose of having a portable video game system, but it does use the exact same AC adapter as the Genesis. And then, there's the games. There were over 360 titles released worldwide, a pretty respectable library. Most hot properties in the early and mid-1990s had a Game Gear title based on them, but if you were like me, you only cared about Sonic the Hedgehog, and boy did the Game Gear have you covered. Today, I'm going to showcase some of the Sonic games made for the Gear. First up is the original Sonic the Hedgehog. At first glance, it seems faithful to the Genesis version. They share 3 of the environments, the Green Hill Zone, the Labyrinth Zone, and the Scrap Brain Zone. You can collect rings and shield pickups, and you can get into special stages. But you don't earn Chaos Emeralds here like you do in the Genesis version. You have to find them in the main levels, there's one in each zone. However, like a number of console to handheld ports, Sonic the Hedgehog may play like its big brother, but it doesn't feel like it. The franchise's trademark sense of speed has been horribly dialed down, with nary a loop, corkscrew, or speed boost to be found. On the contrary, even having a shield on can cause slowdown, which is a shame because the graphics are pretty and ambitious, even in places like the Jungle Zone or, get this, the Bridge Zone. What kind of a title is that? And auto-scrolling stages? Wake me when it's over. Okay, that may have been a bad move. For its overwhelming blandness, I give the original Sonic the Hedgehog 60%, a C-. Now, I didn't play the first Sonic the Hedgehog as a kid, but I did play Sonic 2. In fact, I even did a Let's Play of this game on my main channel. Now, I was a huge fan of the Genesis version, where you could play as Tails the Fox, do spin dashes to rev up from standing still, and play the special stages in a 3D half-pipe. Well, guess what? None of that's present in the Game Gear version. It turns out that Tails has been kidnapped, so you're stuck as Sonic as you try to rescue your pal. One thing that can be said about Sonic 2 is that it's not as dull as its portable predecessor. Right off the bat, the first world is the Underground Zone. Lava? In the first act? I have a bad feeling about this. As a matter of fact, the difficulty curve is all messed up. The first boss is a robotic crab pincer which can only be damaged by balls bouncing down from the side of the screen. And because there are no rings in the boss stages, if you touch the balls, you die. If I touch balls, I die? Well, yeah. Gay hater. What? No, were you even paying attention? So the trouble with this boss is that because of the screen size, you have so little warning as to when and how the balls are going to bounce your way. In fact, this boss was so difficult I could never get past it as a kid. And may I remind you, this is the first zone. Sonic 2 isn't so bad once its momentum picks up again, but it doesn't improve much over its predecessor and only scores 65%, a C. This next one is one of my personal faves, Sonic Chaos. This game marks Tails' playable debut on the Game Gear. You can choose between Sonic and Tails as your character when you start a game. Tails can fly with his eponymous appendages, and Sonic can use his Strike Dash from Sonic CD or pick up rocket shoes to catch his own airtime. You can collect Chaos Emeralds in the special stages, which are simple platforming levels this time around, but are only available to Sonic. So, in essence, your choice of character affects the difficulty. The engine and the zones themselves seem to be borrowed from Sonic 2 on the Genesis, and that's a plus in my book. On the other hand, the levels are on the short side, it doesn't take much skill to finish an act in 30 seconds, and the physics have a moon friction feel at times. But keeping its pedigree into consideration, Sonic Chaos scores 80%, a B. While I said Sonic Chaos was my favorite of the Game Gear Sonic titles, I think this next one is better critically. Sonic Triple Trouble brings back Sonic and Tails, this time facing off against not only Dr. Eggman, but Knuckles the Echidna and Knack the Weasel, hence the Triple Trouble. First thing you'll notice, these are the best graphics on the Game Gear. Scratch that, any 8-bit console out there. Every object is cranked with detail, and amazingly, there's little slowdown. Some of the special stages are 3D flying affairs, with the others being tough 2D platforming challenges, both topped off with mini-boss fights against Knack. And yet, the levels in Triple Trouble are longer than its handheld predecessors, so long that they even have checkpoints. No 30-second speedruns for you. A shining example of the potential packed in the Game Gear, Sonic Triple Trouble scores 95%, an A. The final Sonic platformer on the Game Gear was Sonic Blast in 1996, but sadly, it didn't exactly go out with a bang. Instead of Sonic 3D Blast released at the same time, this game takes its inspiration from Sonic and Knuckles, and that Knuckles is now a playable character. Sonic now has a double jump, while Knuckles gets to use his gliding and wall climbing abilities. Which are awesome, but it's not like those are exclusive to the game, which is good because Blast sucks on toast. The sense of speed has been drawn down yet again, and the collision detection requires too much precision. Personally, I blame the art style. In trying to tie itself with 3D Blast, the game uses CG images rendered as 2D sprites, like in Donkey Kong Country. It's an acquired taste, I'll give it that, but in practice, it gives the game a dull look. Each of the environments, analogous to the worlds from Sonic and Knuckles, have a monochromatic aesthetic, and while the special stages are once again in 3D, they're marred by slow movement and a perspective that makes it difficult to make your targets. Combining dull audio visuals with equally dull gameplay, Sonic Blast just barely survives with 45%, a D-. Wow, 5 Sonic games on a single system. And that's only the platformers, mind you, there were even more spin-off games. But that's a review for another day. Until then, this is Kevin with Ichigo, and you are the Resistance.